Hello and welcome to Right on 14th. My name is Mike Parr.
And I'm Christina Caramo.
We have an action-packed show filled for you guys today. We're talking about a whole host of things. Local bills, obviously. California, University of Michigan Dearborn. What else are we talking about?
Guns.
Guns, obviously.
Guns.
A very hot topic throughout the country right now, so we're definitely going to be talking about that too. First, most important, did you see Roseanne, the new show that came out?
No, I have not.
Really?
No.
People on the left and the right are blown up about it, so I felt like, I'm sure Christina's seen it, but...
I haven't. I'm too busy, but I do want to watch it though.
Yeah?
Yes, I do. I want to check it out.
But anyways, on to the important things. Bills, you want to start us off?
Oh, really quick. Let's
yeah,
give a plug.
yeah.
The 14th Congressional District. Thank you so very much for sponsoring this program. So you can check them out at 14cd.com. Also, they have a social media page. And follow us on social media, Right on 14th on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So let's be friends. And if you are a candidate and would like us to interview you, please email us at righton14th@gmail.com. So... where do we start? Michigan House Bill 5220, increase allowable pepper spray concentration. It passed 36-0 in the Senate.
Cool. Good for them.
I know, surprisingly. I guess this is something that in Michigan, all the Democrats and Republicans agree on this. So it just ups the concentration to 18% if allowable, and it contains ultraviolet dye in the pepper spray.
I like that ultraviolet dye thing. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of bear spray?
No.
My mother has bear spray.
Yeah?
It's for a bear.
It's the same thing. It just goes 20 feet instead of 2 feet?
It's way stronger. The bear can't breathe.
Oh.
Yes.
Shoot.
Yes. Yeah, it's strong. You want a funny story real fast? She accidentally sprayed it in the house. I guess she first got it.
Yeah.
Yes. And we all had to leave out the house. It's crazy strong. Yeah.
If you've never been pepper sprayed, it's a lot of fun.
Bear spray is fun.
Yeah, or tear gas. Getting tear gassed is fun.
Whoa.
I'm from Michigan State, obviously. We were tear gassed once or twice. Anyways, moving on.
Thug life?
Riot life. Michigan House Bill 5017 to create an adult cyberbullying as a crime. Now, this passed 91-17 in the Michigan House, and it was pretty much to do the same thing that we're already doing for children, stating that cyberbullying is a real thing, and it is an intentional using of electronic networks to intimidate, frighten, harass, or cause emotional distress to another human being. Mm-hmm. This, to me, just seems like the definition of snowflakes. I don't know about you, Christina.
Well, I think you may have not considered it from this perspective.
Okay.
Only because it can happen for the simple fact I know of an individual who sent compromising photos of himself to another individual, and then somehow, quote unquote, those images managed to circulate online, and they managed to wind up on gossip sites. So that will constitute as cyberbullying. So it depends on what it. I know in the broad sense of what you mean, because when I first read it on VoteSpotter, I'm like, okay, government overreach. This is crazy. This is stupid.
It's government overreach.
That was my first thought. But then when I start to think about it, when they said with sanctions ranging from 93 days in jail for the first offense to 10 years if the action caused an individual's death. So if you say, for example, was really angry at somebody and you start slandering them all over the internet and doing all kind of stuff to defame them and just harass them and consistently torment them, then I think something does need to happen to stop it, because that's not right. So sometimes they do need to step in if it gets like this individual I knew who had something like that happen to them. So I don't know.
Yeah?
I guess, yeah.
All
yeah.
Right. I think this is a state overreach thing, but I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, I get both sides of the argument, though.
For sure.
So,
yep.
Moving on, U.S. Senate Bill 2311, Debbie Stabenow voted no on this. And also, I believe Gary Peters voted no on this as well.
No surprise.
Ban abortions after 20 weeks. It passed 51-46 in the U.S. Senate to prohibit abortions that occur after 20 weeks, except in cases where the child was conceived from rape or incest, or when carrying the child would cause harm or threaten the life of the mother. So, of course, being pro-life, I don't understand why you would be against this. Why are people getting abortions that late? And for one, I don't believe in abortions at all. But it's interesting that I heard about a Japanese study that was showing the link between abortion and breast cancer. That's a whole other thing in itself. But it has so many harms. It's different between a woman miscarrying and naturally expelling the baby than the baby being violently ripped out. But that's not the point of this be us talking about this. I just thought I would mention that. But nevertheless, that's bad. So she needs to go.
Stabenow? Yeah,
Yes.
Debbie Stabenow, I think we're all pretty much in favor of that.
Stabenow needs to go.
Right. All right, moving on. We got a real quick topic here. So, full disclosure, I'm a student currently at University of Michigan Dearborn, and the Dearborn elections were today for the university, obviously. They must have some rule against everybody actually running as particular parties, so they just kind of make up their own parties, which I think is really interesting. So for the presidents, the student president body, there was 4 people running, a vice and a president for each party. One of the parties was the Michigan Action Party, and the other was the Dearborn United Party. All right, what the heck are those, right? I've never heard of either of those. So it took a lot of digging around, and the Dearborn United had 5 points that they wanted to accomplish while they're in office, and it's pretty standard stuff, right? They want to make life better for students, yada, yada. Now, the other party, the Michigan Action Party, I thought was interesting. 90% of their platform was, we're going to do more than 5 things, like that stinking Dearborn United Party, and we're better than them. Okay, that's fine, but you can't have a whole party based on being not the other party, because that's a terrible platform. So finally, after a lot of research, I found what they're all about. And so here's their mission statement. It says, today and tomorrow, students will once again have the chance to cast their vote in the student government elections. There's a lot of information as to what exactly MAP represents. That's the Michigan Action Party. We're not politically affiliated. Rather, we're focused on improving the campus experience for students. Okay, that's cool, right? Like, yeah, no problem there. So in the past, MAP representatives have planned campus events including Homecoming, Taste of Michigan, and the Gays Craze. Whatever, like the Gays Craze, it's fine. We're being inclusive. That's cool. And then their other claim to fame is creating the Peace and Social Justice minor and planning next fall's Energy Future theme semester. Like, that's their claim to fame, is apparently creating a peace and social justice minor. I don't get this.
What type of job are you going to have with that?
Right? And honestly, I feel like it's exploitative by the university, because really they're just creating a minor that students will spend money on, specifically because the university knows they'll spend money on it. So to me, this is stupid. This is like
complete indoctrination. You pay money to be indoctrinated.
Exactly.
Here we go again with the indoctrination.
Right. Anyway, that's what's happening down at University of Michigan Dearborn. A lot of people think that Dearborn has gone all crazy town. With the large Arab population that they have there. I agree, it has gone crazy town, but for reasons like this, not for reasons like that. Why do we need a peace and social justice minor? Anyway, I'm getting off my pulpit here.
Gender studies.
Yeah. You guys can guess which way I voted in this election. Time to move on.
Okay, so moving on from there, the next thing we want to mention with the Flint Water situation. So it's a financial probe going into the Flint Water situation. And I'm not just saying this as a Republican. I think that a lot of times we get so caught up in the label of the political party that we follow that we just throw common sense right out the window and kick it down the street. And, I understand that ultimately the buck stops with the governor. However, I think it's unfair to blame Governor Snyder for the Flint Water situation. I know a lot of people are like, how people died. Yes, people died, but that doesn't mean it's his fault. And that's kind of the sad state of how people think. It's like automatically blame the person at the top. And what you guys fail to realize that Genesee County has a drain commissioner. I mean, from the beginning, I'm like, the drain commissioner, who is elected to his position, Jeffrey Wright, correct? I believe his name is?
Yep.
He's elected to that position. So what is his job? The drain commissioner is responsible for water and waste management. And how's it the governor's fault, but not his fault? Plus, since Flint, I can't even talk, Flint City Council. Now, some people say, well, they had an emergency manager, but they still had political power and they still had a voice in the situation, which I will explain. So anyway, there is a financial probe going on that's investigating that possibly it was a financial greed led to this. And I also would like to mention that the Genesee County Drain Commissioner is a Democrat. I thought I would just throw that little gem out there, okay?
I think it's also important to point out that this is a separate investigation besides the criminal investigation that's already ongoing into like why this happened and who's responsible. Well, this is a whole separate thing just focused on the financial probe of who's getting kickback from this and how.
Exactly. And that's the thing people need to realize. It's the governor's job. Yes, it's the governor's job to run the state. But everybody else who is elected or appointed or hired to run different municipalities, like what is the mayor's job? What is the county commissioner? There's the governor at the top, then you have the lieutenant governor, then there's different branches and positions underneath to run those various departments. And it is his job to make sure that the right people are in the right places. But if that person fails at their job, especially at an elected position, that is not his fault that the Genesee County Drain Commissioner was greedy. What appears, allegedly, it appears that he was greedy. That's not the governor's fault, and it's not fair to blame him for that. So really quick to just go through this. It says, and I got this from the Detroit News, the article, by the way, just so you guys know. The lead investigator into Flint's water crisis launched a new probe, like Mike just mentioned, with allegations of financial fraud. Okay, so the Andy Arena, the former the FBI director office, the FBI Detroit's office's former director said Thursday. So he was talking about it. Attorney Bill Schuette, who by the way is running for governor, started the original investigation in 2016 after Governor Snyder declared a state of emergency in Flint. We know the situation where there was lead was in the water and people had a lot of health problems. So. Some other folks already got in trouble for it. So basically what happened is Flint, as we know, was getting water from Detroit. But they switched to a new water authority. I'm butchering the name. Mike, you may have to help me out. The Karen Dahl.
I completely missed it. I got to see it because it's such a messed up name, right?
No, me and Mike are not illiterate. Like, I'm struggling to say this.
Well, I think this is the nerd's problem with the world is that we only read these weird names and I never actually hear them. And so it's like, oh, yeah, I've seen that word 1,000 times.
Karen Naldi Water Authority. I said it wrong,
Let's
probably.
just shorten it to the KWA from now on.
Hey, there we go.
Right.
Good idea.
Yep.
KWA. All right. So they got water from the Flint River. That's what happened. So haven't been any charges yet. There is just a probe. So this is something separate from the criminal investigation that happened. Now, it's important to remember that even though Flint did have an emergency manager, which is true, but the city council of Flint still voted 7-1 to change the
but
water.
They don't have any real authority, and I think that's really important to point out here. They can vote on things, but when they're completely circumvented and don't have any sort of power, who cares if they voted on it?
Right. Well, I understand what you're saying, but they still supported it. And it's important to mention that the drain commissioner, again, whose job it is to oversee this situation, not Governor Snyder. It's not Governor Snyder's job to oversee that particular. There's other people who are. Do you really think he can oversee the water of every county? I mean, come on. Even if I'm a CEO of a company, if I'm a principal, the principal has an assistant principal. They have other people. They have their teachers. They have secretaries. They have truancy officers. They have security. They have all these different people in different positions to run different facets of the school. The principal doesn't run every facet of the school, so let's not be illogical here because you just are so caught up on Republicans are evil. And you just want to push that narrative whether it's true or not. It's so stupid. I digress. So moving right along, as we know the situation, how it unfolded, but this is the interesting part about the Flint City Council. So the mayor Weaver and Snyder, they supported getting Flint back onto the Detroit water system, but the Flint City Council was hesitant and they dragged their feet. Pause. So your people are being poisoned. But again, it's Governor Snyder's fault, right? It's all his fault because he's evil and he's a Republican, by the way, right? You have to believe that no matter whether the facts lead to that or not. However, the Flint City Council dragged their feet into changing it over. In fact, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality had to sue the city. They had to sue the city to get the city council on board to change back to Detroit water. But yet it's Governor Snyder's fault. Let me calm down.
So I think the point here is that there are a lot of people in between whoever was making the decision on the ground that inevitably resulted in the water not being healthy to drink and Governor Snyder himself, right? And a lot of those people have been punished. For example, there were 15 people that were indicted due to the criminal legislation. Just a real quick rundown of them. Nick Lyon, the director of Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Eden Wells, the state's chief medical executive. There was Darren Early, the Flint emergency manager, Gerald Ambrose, the other Flint emergency manager, Howard Croft, the former City of Flint public works superintendent. So there's like 15 of these types of people, right, whose job it was to keep the city safe, and they are being punished. But I think that Christina's raising a good question here of what the heck happened to Jeff Wright? He was the drain commissioner. Like, what?
What is his job?
That was his job.
God.
So there were a lot of people punished for this, and rightfully so. But this second separate investigation is also important of how were people incentivized monetarily, and how did that weigh into this situation to actually cause the trouble that we got into?
Mike, but can you please tell the audience about what the ACLU found about Jeff Wright?
About
please.
Jeff, okay.
You can't leave that off. You can't.
So there's a whole nother article, and we can definitely post this up to the Facebook in a minute. So here's what it says. It says that the ACLU of Michigan did an analysis of the contributions to Wright's 2016 campaign that revealed that almost $270,000 was raised in total by Wright during his campaign, and that $188,000, or 70% of that, came from political action committees and employees of companies that were directly doing business with the KWA, the Water Authority, or working on the pipeline. But wait, there's more. This gets better. In a written response to the ACLU's questions, Wright responded that construction contracts for my office are a competitive bid with the lowest qualified bidder awarded to each contract. What he's saying here is, it's not my fault. It's not my problem. The article goes on to kind of condemn Wright some more, is that among Wright's highest bidding biggest contributors to his campaign is a Houston-based engineering firm called Lockwood, Andrews, and Newman. The firm, which is one of the KWA's primary contractors, helped conduct a 2009 study that touted that Genesee County should leave the Detroit system and build their own pipeline. So let's back up here real quick. This engineering company came in and said, oh, yeah, you guys definitely need to be off the Detroit Water Company. And then they turned around and they came back 2 seconds later and they're like, and I know who can build it for you. And the whole time that this was happening, they were throwing cash into Jeff Wright's campaign. How is this not like an open and shut case?
Mike, I'm so emotional. I feel like just like laying on the floor and kicking my feet like a toddler.
This is amazing.
But yet, it is all Governor Snyder's fault.
Right.
People have...
Clearly.
One thing I'm working on is not insulting Democrats. It's like right now I feel like a frog in my throat because I just want to say something so terrible. It is so irritating, but it's just, moving on.
Anyways, so there is definitely more indictments coming for this case because obviously some money exchanged hands and deeds were done that should not have been done for not the right reasons.
And it's not Governor Snyder's fault. Not to say he didn't do anything different. Not saying that he couldn't have done anything differently. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
But to lay the blame at his feet is just beyond stupidity.
It is.
And it's factually incorrect.
Well, it's too high, really. There were a lot of other people in between Governor Snyder and those who were actually influencing the water that made the decisions, and those are the people that should be held responsible, and those are the ones who were held responsible.
My stomach hurts.
Yeah?
I get you. Because I just, it goes, we can segue this into our next topic about how people just need to think a little more.
Oh, yeah.
People just need to think a little more. That's what it's about.
What is the next topic?
Guns.
Guns?
Yes.
So these have been on the news, obviously, for the last, 38 days, ever since the tragic shooting in Florida that we talked about for several weeks now. And so there's been a lot of action around the country, namely the Children's March. What is it? March for Our Lives that happened just last week.
March for Our Lives, and some of the supporters were abortion advocates. Let's just start.
So that's a whole nother topic.
No, I know, but it's just still kind of funny, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Anyway, March for Our Lives. Oh, okay. All right, sure. Okay, moving on. Sorry.
So I think one of the key things to come out of this week was a op-ed by Justice John Paul Stevens. He was Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, and he was actually the longest-serving Supreme Court justice, which I thought was funny. And he came out with a pretty good piece. Not being serious there. All right, so what he has to say here is that rarely in my lifetime have I seen the type of civic engagement that school children and their supporters have demonstrated in Washington, D.C. and other major cities throughout the country this past Saturday, which in all honesty is fantastic. I love that kids are getting involved in politics and social issues. I don't happen to agree with them in this particular instance, but good for you guys. Go get involved. Go vote. But his further paragraphs are much more troublesome, right? Is that the support is a clear sign to lawmakers to enact legislation prohibiting civilian ownership of semi-automatic weapons, increasing the minimum age to buy a gun from 18 to 21, and establishing more comprehensive background checks on all purchases of firearms. Okay, so there's some quote-unquote common sense legislation here that some of it I can agree with, some of it can't. Here's where it really gets troublesome, is the concern for a national standing army might pose a threat to the security of the separate states led to the adoption of that amendment, which provides that, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right to the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, end quote, obviously. Today, that concern is a relic of the 18th century.
Oh, my God.
Now, full stop here. Either this justice is never read a history book in his life, or he's a complete idiot. And let's review why here, right? Is that in the 20th century, 200 million citizens died to their own government. And this happened after they were disarmed. This is not some outdated amendment to the Constitution.
No.
This is not something that we can just discard like the Three-Fifths Compromise, which was very outdated and a horrible thing. This is something that we need to keep our eye out for, because the whole reason for the Second Amendment is to defend against a potentially tyrannical state, which happened. Let's review when. China, during the Great Leap Forward in the middle of the 1930s to 1960s, really. The Great Leap Forward, great idea, right? This was a government program that was supposed to bring China up to be a first world nation. One of the first things that they did with this program is that they were going to get rid of the four pests. They were going to get rid of, I think it was mosquitoes, it was like flies, and it was rats, and it was sparrows. So when they got rid of all these sparrows, what happened is the locust population went nuts because there was no more natural predators. The locust population ate a lot of the crops. Terrible. And on top of that, the Chinese government sent all the people that had been previously working on the farms to go work in steel mills, because you need a lot of steel if you're going to become a first world nation. The consequence of this is that acres and acres and millions of acres throughout China of crops were left standing at the end of the harvest cycle and were either eaten by the locusts or rotted in place because the people that were supposed to harvest them were now at the steel mills. The consequence of this is that millions and millions of people, some estimate between 30 and 55 million people, starved to death at the hands of their government.
I have a question real quick. Was this before or after the Communist Revolution?
This was during the communist time, because this is a government-owned control of the agricultural population. So this is communist ideology saying that the government will take care of this. If you give me all of the grain, I will distribute it properly. And obviously that didn't happen. So that's probably the largest government-sanctioned murder, essentially, of citizens. The Soviet Union killed about 6 million Ukrainians in a kind of similar situation, actually. The 5-year plan was forced grain production. The grain production didn't really turn out. A bunch of people starved to death. Nazi Germany, obviously, between 10 to 12 million people. And this is a really open-shut case because people had their weapons taken away, and then Germany plowed through those countries in a blitzkrieg. And the reason that we know that these people could have defended themselves is to look at Warsaw. And when there's a small population, small Jewish population that was armed, they fended off the German government for months. And that was phenomenal. There's an Armenian genocide in which Turkey essentially said, oh, you guys, you're not really Turkish, but you live in Turkish territory, so we're going to take your guns away. World War I came around, and they're like, oh, shoot, we need a bunch of warm bodies to send into World War I. I know, we're going to send in the Armenians. They did. Obviously, World War I didn't work out for Turkey and the Ottoman Empire, and consequently, the government blamed the Armenians for their outlook on the war because they needed a scapegoat. And what happened after they blamed the Armenians? They killed off the rest of the Armenians.
Yeah, sure did. And you know, and throw something in there that's really interesting is that one of the most popular liberal internet shows is the Young Turks. You're going to name yourself after a group of people who exterminated a bunch of people for their ethnic and religious beliefs. Now let a bunch of conservatives come out with a program and name themselves after a group of people who exterminated people for their ethnic and religious beliefs. What would be said about us? But it's okay for them to do it. And just throwing that out there. And I highly doubt that he's ignorant of that fact.
No, I'm sure. So there's got to be other reasons that we don't know about why they're called the Young Turks, right? But the message here is that throughout the 20th century, people had their weapons rights revoked. And after that, I guess not consequently, but after that, the government came through and murdered literally hundreds of millions of people. And so when people in America in our modern day and age say that the Second Amendment is outdated and that it's completely impossible for the government to do anything to us, all you have to do is look back 50 years and say, this happened then. it can happen today.
And, the interesting thing about Justice John Paul Stevens, I know one of the other things you said was he either is ignorant of history or just like he doesn't know anything. I would actually add a C in there, or his motives are nefarious. Because I cannot believe, I'm sure there are some people who are just this naive to say, oh, it's outdated, but there are a very powerful segment of people who know exactly what they're doing. And so the thing people need to kind of realize is that there's danger in centralizing power. You need to have power disseminated. And so the thing about it, we were kind of talking about earlier about Thomas Paine's book, Common Sense. Now, anybody who took a history class, I remember when I was in 8th grade, I swear, like, I could hear Thomas Paine Common Sense in my sleep. Like, our teacher talked about it so much. But as an adult, I bought the book, and one of the things that he talked about is, like, government is kind of like a necessary evil. Because if you had a group of people, just say, for example, if me, Mike, and the audio engineer here, we grabbed like 10 of our closest friends and we started a village. Not essentially, but eventually we would have to have some type of system. Otherwise, people would just be doing anything. So we got to have a leader, and then that leader will have a right and command and somebody who will oversee like this and that. And so people are going to naturally organize themselves. That's just what we do. However, so that's something we have to deal with. But when the power is centralized only to a select few, that gives that select few all the power over the other people. And I think one of the problems is on the political left, they don't understand human nature. They don't understand. They just, look at the stupid stuff they say about gender. That's just a perfect example. They don't have a concept of human nature whatsoever. Human nature never changes. Human nature never change. Never change. It's just different players in the game.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't. People do the same stuff. So it's when we have an armed populace, that leaves us in control of our government. Now, I was listening to a radio program today. I was telling you about that part. I believe this, I go on and on about globalism, but the same people who are pushing to take our guns away are also pushing for illegal immigration, because when you have, the thing about illegal immigration is that it changes the voting block. You know what I'm saying? So the Democrats are supporting it so they get the votes because it's bad for our nation. So there's no reason to support a policy that's hurting Americans if you're supposed to represent Americans. But they're not going to tell you what they're really going to do. So they're just going to we just throw the caboose of racism on there just to make whatever we want to do pass along. So the same people that are looking to change the voting dynamic for themselves are also the same people pushing to do away or subdue our Second Amendment rights. So one of the things, I had in our notes was about how weapons affect history. So whoever has the most powerful weapon is the one who's in control. You know what I'm saying? Just like, for example, it's all about power. Human beings, we want power because when you have power, you control the resources. So when you control the resources, you determine what you have. You determine your needs. That's the benefit of being financially wealthy. One of the biggest benefits of being financially wealthy is you can buy what you want when you want it. So humans, who doesn't want to control the resources? So nevertheless, there's this mental flaws history of the world. What made me think of this is I have their book actually called History of the World, and I was reading how like the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, they got those names based on what was the most superior weapon at the time. So think about it, our human history, parts of human history was marked by who had the most powerful weapon. So you shouldn't. And so look like Justice Stevens. He knows this. He's not stupid. You know how powerful weapons are. So just to kind of go through, they started with spear throwing devices, which is Stone Age. So that was at that time that was the most powerful weapon. So of course, whoever had that weapon was in control. To keep going down, the Hyksos group from Asia Minor began to take over Egypt. That was the Bronze Age. So they brought in a new type of weapon, which Egypt actually learned what they did and wound up copying the weapon and driving them out. So that's another example in history where the superior weapon, again, is always going to win the war. Then after that, you have the Iron Age that came after that. Then after that, you had the Byzantine Empire, where they were able to help Western Europe kind of protect them from the Turkish and Arab forces with Greek fire. Which is funny, when I read about Greek fire, it's almost, if you watch Game of Thrones, when they call wildfire, it's the same thing. Because it burns on top of water, and we still can't figure out how they made this fire. So just going through, as you can see, historically speaking, the powerful weapon determined who was in power. The English longbow, when the English fighters, it was 10,000 of them versus 40 to 50,000 French fighters, and the English only lost 300 soldiers at the Battle of Crécy, and the French lost 8,000 to 10,000. And then you had the Chinese who invented gunpowder, where they used for grenades and other explosives. And what's actually interesting is that the Chinese I had this book, and they actually did a PBS special about it. It's called 1421, and how the Chinese were the first ones to circumnavigate the world. When we thought it was actually the Europeans, it was the Chinese who did it. But again, that superior power of gunpowder changed things. And then the cannons in medieval Europe, with the noble families fighting, and then the most recent times with Western Europe. So Western Europe, you think about, is just France, England, Portugal, Spain, a few countries. They were able to conquer 80% of the world. 80% of the world, this little sliver of area, was guns. It changed the game. So you got tanks in World War I, the AK-47, nuclear weapons. I mean, it goes on and on. So I think we've proven our case that the Second Amendment is not about hunting. It's about power and freedom. And when the people have the power, and it is so foolish that a lot of socialists we're going to give the people the power. And I was talking to a really good friend of mine. We were talking about it. And he was like, well, you want power in the hands of the people. Socialism gives power to the government.
Yeah.
What people don't understand, with freedom comes responsibility. You know?
Absolutely.
So when you're free, you are responsible for your condition, which means that either you sink or you swim. That's determined upon your hard work. And I think we have this false notion that when people are poor and struggling, they're inherently a victim. No, they're not. A lot of people are poor and struggling because they're stupid. I don't know. That's just...
This reminds me of the book Guns, Germs, and Steel. If you never read that book, it explains why Western Europe took over the world in the time that they did. And it's all about, of course, as you can guess, guns, germs, and steel. Steel because the Iron Age. It's pretty simple. So
I mean, and that's something that we need to understand. So it's kind of naive, and it's really sad, because we want to take a different angle when discussing the march. We didn't want to go through and this person. I mean, you got your people who come on 5 days a week to talk about that. What we try to do is a different, I guess, more of an in-depth analysis of why things are so important. And so it's really sad to see a lot of children and a lot of people are just so clueless. And and this shows why that saying of, these not, what is the word I'm looking for? Sayings that are overly repeated. Not idioms are not the word I'm trying to think. Like cliche. Okay. Like a cliche that history repeats itself.
Yeah.
Things are cliches because they're true. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And history, this is why history repeats itself. You cannot be this ignorant of history. I mean, the Western Europe is the most perfect example of the superior weapon. In our recent time, and look at the nuclear weapon.
Right.
That's what made instantly after World War II, what happened with the United States? We became the most dominant country in the world and have been for the last 70 years.
And also the most peaceful time in the world. I would like everybody to know, too. You know why? Because nobody wants anybody to use a nuke ever again. Mm-hmm. I'd like to address the one last argument that the left really likes to throw out there is that the Second Amendment doesn't stand a chance against a modern military. And the point I have against that is Afghanistan. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan and lost. Mm-hmm. And the United States military invaded Afghanistan and lost. And we didn't lose to a superior military that had tanks and satellites that are going to shoot us from space. No, we lost to a bunch of guys herding goats and farming opium with an AK-47 on his back. You know why? Because you cannot defeat a resistant native force. I don't care how good of an occupying force you are, you cannot defeat them. And so if the United States government was supposed to come at us with these F-35s and with the A-10s and with their battleships and with the aircraft carriers and with their M1A1 Abrams tanks, it doesn't matter if you have a resistant native force.
Look at Vietnam.
Same thing.
Look at Vietnam.
It's the same thing.
You're absolutely correct. And then, too, and I've seen that argument, and it's a very stupid argument. So because they have a superior weapon, that means we should lay down our weapons?
Right? That's a horrible argument.
This goes back to us saying that one of the things that people need to consider with conservatives is, and this is one example of us understanding human nature better. Again, the political left, I feel like, and some of them are well-meaning. I don't want to seem like all of them are just a bunch of evil, crazy people, because that's not what I'm trying to say. But I think a lot of them fail to grasp human nature. See, they're into social engineering, and they feel if they can socially engineer people perfectly, then people will turn out to be something different.
People aren't perfect, though, is the problem.
people are not perfect. The only way you can socially engineer people is in a socialistic or communistic society where you take away their individuality and their humanity, which you cannot take away people's humanity. I mean, people are, I don't care where you go in the world. I don't care what time in history you go to. People do the same things because people are people, so you cannot change human nature. It's almost... It's part of our survival mechanism to want power. Like, we're motivated, even though I don't believe in evolution, but it does have a valid point of us motivated to survive. And one of the top ways we survive, among others, is power. And so you're not going to take away people's will to want to have power unless you, this is a whole nother theory not to go off into, but unless you have them so occupied by other and irrelevant things that's how you take their power away, because they're occupied on stupid stuff.
Moving on.
It's true.
All right. Last topic for today is California. So there's a lot happening, in particular with the census in California right now. Christine, you had a couple articles to share here.
Well, yeah. Oh, really quick, before we do that, we're going to give a plug to the 14th Congressional District. Thank you for sponsoring the show. Also, check us out and check the Michigan's 14th Congressional District out on Facebook and the website. Also, if you are on social media, which you probably are if you're listening to the show, you can like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can email us at righton14th@gmail.com. So please do that, and especially if you are a candidate who would like to be interviewed on the show, we would love to interview you. Just email us at righton14th@gmail.com.
On that point, I think we're going to have a Secretary of State candidate coming up here either next week or the week after to call in, and we're going to give them the same kind of interview that we gave to Mary Charter Lang a couple weeks ago. Our whole point on this show is that we want to give equal time and equal bearing to all the candidates, because we don't want to choose sides, and we want you guys to decide on who you like is the best. So we're going to pose the same questions to different people running for the same position, so that you can kind of get a feel for who you want to vote for. Because our job here is not to sway you and say this is the best person. Our job's to inform and entertain. So if you guys have anything to say about that, let us know. Facebook, comments, YouTube, whatever you want.
Right. So moving right along, the California showdown. I labeled this.
Oh, man.
California is such an interesting place. Like, I mean, I think we could do an entire hour on just dissecting them from their have the highest poverty rate to just all kind of foolishness. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. So with California, Orange County, this is an article in the LA Times that says Orange County may take a stand against sanctuary laws. So the issue is in California, it seems like they have this crazy left-wing government, which they do. However, that all the citizens aren't crazy left-wing people. They're not. And so a lot of the citizens are really, really angry. In fact, Mike, when maybe like about 2 weeks ago, I showed you the video of the guy standing up talking. He had on like the Trump Make America Great Again hat and T-shirt. It was like, y'all coming in our neighborhood selling drugs, and you this. You don't remember he was yelling. I said, I'm going to tell all y'all business. And they got these candy houses. Remember that guy?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And after that, several people from different LA neighborhoods got up and were complaining about illegal immigration and how it was impacting their neighborhood and their community. And we talk, and it's such a tiring argument. But again, the political left, they just throw that little caboose on there and be like, oh, you just don't want people here because they're Hispanic. But a lot of the people who were getting up and complaining were Hispanic themselves. It's irrelevant. It's American citizens are saying, listen, this is taxing on our communities. Because one girl was saying, I don't know if it was that town hall or another one or city council meeting, but she was saying that like their schools become overcrowded with all these people coming here, but because they're not citizens and they weren't part of count day, the school resources get strained money doesn't grow on trees. Again, another cliche that's true, so the resources get drained. So a lot of people in California are extremely, extremely unhappy about this whole sanctuary state business. So the article goes on to say, apparently another tiny place called Los Alamitos, California, voted to defy the law protecting immigrants in the country illegally. Pause. They love to try to separate it. They don't want to say illegal immigrants. They don't want to say that because they want to make it sound like It's all a mind game, guys. It's all about perception. You know what I'm saying? Glass half empty, glass half full. You should understand perception, at least. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all up. So they do that on purpose just so they can lump them in with immigrants. Again, illegal immigration. So Orange County is poised to become a counterpoint against the state's resistance to Trump administration policies. So basically, these counties are fighting back. Citizens are tired.
That's fantastic, right?
I
Because
think
the
it's
point here
excellent.
is that we don't hate immigrants.
Exactly.
We hate illegal immigration. And the two distinctions there is illegal and immigration, not immigrants. So immigration in itself is good, and immigrants in themselves are good. But illegal immigration is a bad thing. And that's what the people of California are sick of here, is they're sick of paying for and having these people around that they don't belong there for whatever reason. And it shouldn't be that way. And the real problem here is that the local government, what's happening is that if a police officer stops person X and person X, seems suspicious for whatever reason, they can't then turn person X over to the federal government because they're a sanctuary city. So regardless of whether they know that person X is here legally or illegally, they're not allowed to say anything to the federal government. And I think that's a problem, is that we're prohibiting information flow. We're prohibiting communication between the states and the federal government. And since when is communicating a bad thing?
And on top of it all, even with the ICE raids, they're not just going down knocking on people's doors. They're actually getting people who are felons.
Right.
So on top of and then on top of it, what's so crazy, it's like no country, even Mexico, they have stiff laws for being there illegally. So we're evil for wanting to say you have to come here legally. Like and also as Republicans, that is illegal immigration is one of our strongest points. It is. It's one of our strongest points because people I talk to, even people I know who are Democrats, are unhappy. Like, I know some people are like, yeah, because it's a problem. I talk about on the show a couple times, my uncle. Put him out of business. I talked about that several times, So, it's such a problem. So, anyways, the Orange County supervisor, Sean Nelson, said, he said that these state laws are preempted by federal law. Our officers actually face penalties under state law if they so much as talk to federal agents for the wrong thing. So they are being penalized for following the law. And you have to ask yourself, why is California doing all this? We kind of talked about this earlier. It changes the voting dynamic. Allowing the illegal immigrants in the country, of course they're committing voter fraud. Of course. Come on.
I don't think it's them committing voter fraud. I just think that in 20 years, they're going to have a next generation, and that next generation will be Americans because they're born on American soil, and those people will be able to vote. So I think they're playing the long game here. I don't think it's a voter fraud thing.
Well, it's both. Now, as you right about the long game, I agree with that, but also if they become citizens. Because remember, one of the things they wanted was amnesty.
Well, you can't become a citizen if you're here illegally.
Well, no, but they wanted...
Even Obama didn't let that happen.
No, he didn't, but they wanted to grant them all amnesty.
Right, but that's not the same as being a citizen. It's not the same as being allowed to vote.
Yes, but there have been cases of voter fraud, though. Lots of them. And I do think I understand what you're saying. I really do. I'm going to concede that you may have a point, but I still think it could potentially lead to voter fraud. Even if not just voter fraud, it's a strain on the resources.
It is.
It's a strain on the resources. And we talked about on the program before about how it affects the economy, how it affects wages, jobs, and all that in schools as far as people coming in.
Right.
And then because the Democrats are so gung-ho on making sure all the illegal immigrants stay, a lot of people who should be gone, who are a threat to Americans' lives, remain for their own political benefit. So to kind of segue to the next point in regards to that, the census for the state of California, well, let me say this. The Trump administration, not even the Trump administration, actually it's the Census Bureau. So let me back up. It's not his administration. He did not ask for this. It actually was the Census Bureau who are now going to start asking people their citizenship status during the census. So this is important for a couple of reasons. Now, the state of California is going to sue the Trump administration because they're not happy about it. The thing about it is California gained congressional seats based on how many residents are in their state. So it's really important for them to import people in, even if those people can't vote. Because before they weren't asking people their citizenship. So they wouldn't know either way. You just see how many people are living there. So then you get congressional seats based on how many people live in your state.
Right.
So now if they're importing in thousands upon thousands, if not a million or a couple million people, they get extra seats. And so I think they already got a couple extra seats, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, they're going to get between 5 and 6 extra seats when the 2020 census comes out. Obviously, that hasn't been distributed yet, and it definitely hasn't been tallied yet. But that's the point, right? Is if they keep the citizenship question off the ballot, then two things will happen. The people who are here illegally will be incentivized to fill out the ballot because it will give them more representation. And as a consequence of that, then the state of California will be more accurately portrayed at its current population, albeit with a percentage of people who are here illegally, and they will get more representation in Congress at the expense of states like Michigan and like the 14th congressional district, for example. Michigan will almost certainly lose representative seats when the next census comes out. And it's because situations like this. A, people are fleeing Michigan. B, millions of people are moving to California from inside the country and outside the country.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. But I mean, I was going to say that people are leaving California, but that's a slow drive. Well, actually, their resources, the one thing, the water.
Yeah.
The water crisis in California, that water situation, that's a hot mess. It is interesting how the news only talks about certain stories because it's just such a dire situation in our food supply and the commercialized farming, and that's not going to go into commercialized farming, which I just whatever.
I hate that too. Can we agree on that? That commercialized farming, growing almonds in the middle of the desert is the stupidest thing.
Commercialized farming is a part of the problem with the water. And if California has a horrible drought, where are you going to eat? So go support Eastern Market in Detroit. Go support your local farmers. Local farming isn't just cute and hipsterish. It's actually very agriculturally, environmentally, economically savvy thing to do because commercialized farming is such a problem. And if California gets hit with an earthquake, which is ticking and can happen at any moment. Even Yellowstone has had a lot of seismic activity. Animals have been leaving from the little, what did you call the opening of a volcano? We're all off topic. But what it starts with the C. I can't remember.
Crater?
No, not the crater. The forget
Cauldron?
it.
Whatever, we're getting off topic here.
The point is that there's a lot of seismic activity. If Yellowstone erupts again, we could have a complete a blackout and all kind of stuff. Which again, that's a ticking time bomb, which people don't want to worry about. But realistically, if there was an earthquake in California, which would totally destroy our food supply, that would cause the volcano. Oh my God, we sound like apocalyptic and stuff. But anyway, the point we're making is that I was saying that people are leaving California because of the water drought. But the point we're making is that the seats. Let's stay on topic, Christina. I will do it.
Congressional seats in California are going up because legal and illegal people are flowing into California at an alarming rate.
Yes, and so that is such a problem. So again, when we complain about illegal immigration, we have lots of valid reasons, not what the media tries to portray, not what the left tries to portray. We have legit valid reasons that I would even love to just debate a Democrat on these issues and see them rebut because they can't.
Well, here's the Democratic argument, right? So I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second.
For sure.
Is that the illegal immigrants carry their own weight because the vast majority of illegal immigrants work for a paycheck, and so the government automatically takes out taxes for the paycheck. But because these people are not legal citizens, they can't get their tax returns back. And so they're actually kind of paying twice as many taxes as the average American because they're paying taxes and then they're not getting their refund.
So they're saying that they get tax taken out of a check?
Yeah.
So they must have an illegal Social Security number then?
Yeah.
So, boom, you guys are done. That argument. Next.
Well, hold on. What do you mean next? Because me personally, getting out of my devil's advocate chair, I say if we could just institute the, what's the Social Security check program called? There's a website that any business can go on, plug in a Social Security number, and see if it's valid, to see if 1234 actually applies to Mike Parr, and if Mike Parr is alive or dead, if this person's real. E-Verify, that's what it's called. And so that's my answer personally to this whole thing is, yeah, there are a lot of people with fake Social Security cards working for paychecks in California. Force every company to E-Verify and get those people out of here. If you make it so disincentivized for the company to hire people that are illegal, and when those people can no longer find jobs, you'll at least stop the bleeding of illegal immigration into this country.
Okay, another devil's advocate argument is, what about the berries and the different fruit? Who's going to pick our fruit? That is an American citizen, duh. Oh, my God.
I hate that argument, right? Like, oh, yeah, no American's going to pick berries for $5 an hour. That just wouldn't happen. That's the point, right? Is they're going to raise wages to a living wage, and then Americans will work for a living wage and pick berries. Like, yes, your berries are going to cost a little bit more, but I will be fine paying a couple extra dollars for my berries if I know that I'm supporting an American citizen in doing so. It's the free market at play here.
And it balances itself out. Especially if it was not so much commercialized farming. But at any rate, that was the point. That would definitely affect the prices. But that's a terrible argument. And then on top of it, it's exploitive of the people.
It is.
And the thing about it is you have to remember, like we're saying, the issue isn't against illegal immigrants. It's against illegal immigration. And that's a very, very, very important thing to point out because I truly empathize with these people. Interesting point. One of my classes I was telling you about, I teach, I have a very large Hispanic population. One of my students today was giving a speech about suicide. And she was saying that there's a lot of suicide in Central America. And so as I mentioned, a lot of my students, their families are originally from Central America. And I, initially when we think about countries and suicide, Japan is the first thing that pops in your mind because of their high honor culture and all types of other things. And so I said, I was like, is there high suicide in Central America? And my students just looked at me. They were like, are you being funny? Are you being sarcastic? I'm like, no, I'm being actually quite serious. And they were telling me about the high suicide rate in Central America. They were saying because of the cartels and the drug gangs, it's so much pressure on the people to join or be complicit in whatever they got going on that a lot of the people are like, we can't take it anymore. My other student was like the level of rape that women experience over there. A lot of women are forced into arranged marriages. You got girls 14 years old getting married. So they have a really high This is what my students, again, it was 4 girls, and their families are they're Americans, of course, but their families are originally from Central America, and they were telling me about it. I'm like, golly. So on top of that, I empathize with the people who come here. We really, really do. However, we have to take care of American citizens first. We cannot rescue other people at the expense of American citizens. We just can't.
See, to me, that's the one good reason to have people come into this country is if they are fleeing some sort of actual abuse or conflict or war, then absolutely, we're not going to turn away people that are going to die otherwise. But it's the people that are coming here for the economic opportunities that I want to put a stem to is say, if you want economic opportunities, you're obviously a very entrepreneuring person because you're willing to make a dangerous trek into America. Why don't you do something in your own country that'll help your own country, help your own people? So really, we're not doing any favors to their home countries also because it's kind of like a brain drain, right? It's a brain drain of effective people from those countries to America. And that's not helping anybody.
That's 2 points to what you said. I remember Assad, I think that's his name, the president or whatever from Syria.
Yep.
And that's what he was saying with the refugees thing. It was a woman, I forgot where news outlet she was from, but she was interviewing him. And nevertheless, she was interviewing him, and he was saying that we don't want our people to leave. He's like, why? Who's going to rebuild? Who's going to build our country? Yeah. Why would you want your best, your brightest, your strongest to leave your country? Then who is there? Like you said, the most important thing is human capital. I was reading an article where Bill Gates was in Nigeria, and he was talking about, I guess, the Nigerian president and several other leaders in Nigeria was saying, your most important asset is human capital. So it's not like... I couldn't have said it better myself, what you just said. We're not helping these countries by bringing in their best. And that's kind of what made America so powerful is the best of every country came together. You think about it, whenever you have these melting pot societies, every culture has strong points in their culture. So when everybody comes together, the best and the brightest, they bring the strong points from that particular country, and they work together to build a better society. So, the thing about it is, but those countries, like you said, it's a brain drain. They lose their best. So it's not good. It's just not.
Nope. So we need to help them help themselves. But anyways, that's about all the time we have for this topic. We want to say a special thank you to the 14th Congressional District Republican Party. You can always find them at 14cd.com. They're a fantastic resource for anything like becoming a precinct delegate or just if you want to get involved in the Republican Party in this county or in the 14th Congressional District. Awesome resource.
Bye.
Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you.
That's off. Give me 1 second for Facebook.
All right. That's good.
Yes, I think that went well.
All right, we gotta get out of here.
Oh, yes, you did say 5 minutes early. We're gone. We're gone. We're gone. We're gone. We're gone.
Apparently, while we were on the show, my dog escaped the fence because I got a text from a next door neighbor saying, "Hey, I found the hole."